The time has finally come, Tarnished. Just before we begin, a note to let you know that this is a spoiler-free review, though what you consider a spoiler is ultimately up to you. So at most, there might be one or two early game areas or enemies that you haven't seen before, but if you're wanting to go into the game totally fresh, it's probably safer to just come back and watch this later. With that out of the way, here's our Elden Ring review. At first, it's happening so slowly that you barely notice it. Out on the rolling, introductory fields of Limgrave, every encounter, no matter how small, is a risk. One that must be carefully weighted and considered before launching yourself into the fray. Every dank, echoing cave you step into could spell your doom. Every seemingly sleepy ruin or settlement you pick your way through carefully could be harbouring any number of twisted inhabitants seeking out your cold, lonely end. Even out under the vast, open skies of these lands between, you aren't safe. Your trusty steed Torrent might speed you from certain dangers, true, but even he isn't fleet-footed enough to outrun a tornado of dragonfire or a billowing cloud of poison spewed forth by a corrupted, sentient flower. In this world, you start as nothing. No one. But then, little by little, your power grows. The lowly bandits and wolves and soldiers that you cut down turn to runes. These runes are channeled into power that steadies your sword hand, bolsters your spellcasting intellect, and enhances your ability to withstand a troll club full to the face. Bandits and wolves and soldiers turn to demons and witches and fae, and your power grows again. You feel you might be strong enough to journey south, to a ragged peninsula where beasts have overrun a castle by the sea, to the west, where lush marshlands have swallowed whole a once great centre for scholarly learning, to the east, where desert sands are stained red with blood and rot, or to the north, where a great golden capital lies. Or perhaps you'll set off to a multitude of other faraway destinations in between. As your power grows, so too does the challenge and the wonder of the journey before you. And before long, you feel you just might be strong enough to challenge the demigods themselves. This is an ebb and a rhythm well known to fans of From Software games by now. It's a song of life and death and a fading world and monstrous beings, with every refrain a challenge to get back up and try and die and try again. From Software games, namely Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Sekiro, pride themselves on this particular genre of melancholic, masochistic action and are, in turn, loved by fans for it. But they aren't known for being all that welcoming or accessible to new players. It's been clear for some time that with Elden Ring, the developer was hoping to satisfy core fans with ample challenge in a vast open world, the biggest the studio has ever undertaken, while courting potential new players with the promise of tools to help ease their passage through incredibly and increasingly unforgiving enemy encounters. In this, Elden Ring is surprisingly successful. Veteran Souls-like fans will find stages set for epic showdowns, ready to test their resolve, while new players can call upon small and entirely optional devices that, while still demanding a certain level of skill before allowing you to carry on through the world, preserve the thrill without making you feel like you're repeatedly bashing your head against a brick wall. A lot of enemy encounters and even boss fights are made instantly more manageable with the simple inclusion of a distraction to buy you seconds of breathing room. And this part is played by new mechanic spirit summons, reusable items that spring forth echoes of beings to fight by your side until their death or the death of your enemy. Generally, their damage output will be laughable, and they can only be summoned in certain areas. Thus, they aren't exactly there to hold your hand, but buying you a few seconds of time can be everything in the lands between. Similarly, a mechanic whereby flasks of health and FP, your magic resource, is topped up after defeating an entire group of enemies can give you a helping hand when things get risky. But relying upon this isn't without its own inherent dangers either. Then there are Stakes of Marika, where you can sometimes revive after death instead of a Site of Grace. It'll negate the sometimes lengthy and dangerous walk back to a boss battle, but you won't have the ability to change some of your setup and loadout as you would at a Site of Grace. And utilising great runes, sources of great power found from felling some of the world's strongest beings, can be a huge boon when you need it the most. But this doesn't come without a price. First, you must activate the Great Rune, an obscure process on its own. And then you must choose an exceedingly rare, finite consumable item in order to tap into that power for as long as you stay alive. In true From Software fashion, even when giving you the tools to move through the world a little easier, the underlying message is that nothing is free and everything comes with a trade-off. For veteran fans, this is the experience you've come to expect from a Souls-like title. But the open world brings added thrills of discovery. It's clear that Hidetaka Miyazaki and co. delighted in the opportunity to create some truly stunning vistas. I genuinely gasped out loud at several utterly beautiful landscape reveals, often showcasing From's trademark striking, high fantasy with an incredibly subtle underpinning of dark humour. They may be huge and open, but the lands between still feel meticulously handcrafted. Dark corners hide lonely secrets and forgotten tales, richly woven into the tapestry of the world itself, through environmental storytelling or an item description, or a single, seemingly throwaway line of NPC dialogue. You still get the structural ingenuity of Miyazaki's multi-layered world design in the tighter, more considered and more dangerous so-called legacy dungeons, self-contained areas that are set apart from the open world and hide its deadliest, most important foes. There are smaller dungeons out in the world as well, and these serve as warm-ups to the main boss encounters and are great practice for new players in particular, with their rewards generally comprising of a new weapon or an Ash of War to bolster your arsenal. Elden Ring is much more accessible in a literal sense as well. Fast travel between discovered sites of grace is unlocked very early on in the game and is almost always an option open to you unless you're currently engaged in combat. At these sites of grace, you can level up, enhance your healing flasks, set your spells and great runes, and attend to your Ashes of War. Equipable weapon effects that can grant status effects like bleed or magic or lightning damage to your weapon, while also granting it a special attack or effect mapped to the left trigger button. It's yet another way the gameplay has been subtly opened up. In the past, these effects would have been permanently set to one weapon, but by allowing them to be freely switched around should the need arise, From has given players the ability to more easily experiment and adapt as they go to find a winning boss strategy that could have otherwise been out of their reach without copious hours of grinding and upgrading. Now, you may have noticed that I'm mostly steering clear of specifics when it comes to describing the world, boss encounters, side quests, or overarching story of Elden Ring. With good reason. This is the type of experience that benefits from you going in as unspoiled as possible. Fans can rest assured that you can find the usual mix of faux Shakespearean tragedy, lovable if odd bit characters, and devious double crossings, if you know where to look. The world of Elden Ring is purposefully more alive than in other From Software games. The lands between are just tipping their prime, rather than in the throes of a full-scale apocalyptic tailspin, a la, for example, Lord Ran of Dark Souls. Thus, you'll meet a slightly more lively bunch of characters out in the world. Many of these more than once if you choose to follow their quest lines. But all that said, I'm also steering clear of specifics because I know there's still so much left out there to discover. So much that will only become apparent way past launch. Even tackling later game areas at level 50 or 60 or above still feels like barely scratching the surface of what the world has to offer. And in the tradition of From Software, there are multiple endings to Elden Ring, with some perhaps requiring obscure steps or even replays of the game in order to achieve them. Whether Elden Ring successfully pulls in new players or not remains to be seen. The previously mentioned new mechanics may indeed make the game more accessible to newcomers, as does the enticing shift to a more open-world structure, enabling you to simply nope out of a difficult battle, try your luck somewhere else, and come back stronger and more prepared than before. That Souls-like games can't quite escape the reputation for challenge that they've built for themselves is both a blessing and a curse. Fans wear their dedication to these titles like a badge of honor, while potential players look on and may still feel uneasy about whether they'll be up to scratch, or if they'll even find enjoyment in From Software's particular brand of Moorish torment. But if there was ever a time and a particular game to get on board with, it's now, and it's Elden Ring. These experiences aren't for everyone, but this is the best and brightest, often literally, the series has ever been. And at launch, new players will also have the added benefit of busy servers, meaning there will be plenty of other seasoned players to call upon in the game's cooperative multiplayer element if you're having trouble. In terms of downsides, Elden Ring lacks a bit of polish here and there. On PS5, texture pop-ins are frequent and, pre-launch, we experienced a number of hard crashes to the console home screen. Gameplay-wise, not all new features are created equal, and while Torrent is a welcome way to explore the landscape from relative safety, mounted combat can feel awkward rather than epic, as you and enemies circle around one another in wide sweeps, swiping at the air and connecting with nothing for what feels like an embarrassing number of passes. Additionally, item crafting and resource collection feel like inclusions drawn from other games, rather than something that feels necessary here. Mileage may vary, of course, and other character classes may benefit from it more than others, but for all the emphasis put on crafting by the proliferation of recipe cookbooks and ingredients I found out in the world, my Spellsword Prisoner class barely ever had a need to make anything, with the exception of a couple of poison-staunching boluses. Melee or ranger classes needing ready access to arrows or thrown items might well feel differently, however. Also, in all honesty, George R.R. Martin's heavy inclusion in the marketing for the title remains rather baffling. The exact nature of his contribution is unclear at best. One can only assume it was a collaboration designed to raise the game's profile in non-hardcore circles. But if there's one studio that needed no help in crafting an enticing dark fantasy game world, From Software is it. And George R.R. Martin's cultural currency in 2022 is hardly enough to change the trajectory of Elden Ring's success on its own. All that said, this is a glorious game, one that established fans are going to savour for some time to come, and one that may just welcome new fans into the FromSoft fold. Sumptuous visual design, dark and detailed lore, and a vast, open world are reason enough to venture out into the lands between. Add to that From Software's unforgiving and unforgettable gameplay loop, and this is truly something special. We'll be covering lots more Elden Ring content on the channel in the very near future, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss anything. In the meantime, why not check out one of these other spoiler-free Elden Ring videos to get you in the mood for launch. We'll see you out there in the lands between, Tarnished. Thanks for watching. Bye!